Is Caleb Williams truly a generational quarterback prospect? Let's just be honest with ourselves. That's what he's been built up to be by draft media, by football media, and by fans. Been built up to be this mythological figure. It's not fair to ask him to be that, but is he? Let's dive into it as we discuss USC quarterback Caleb Williams here on the latest episode of SKOL Search.
Welcome to Real Forno Show, hosted by Tyler Forness, the managing editor of USA Today's Vikings Wire, writer for the College Football Network, publisher of Substack Run In Shooter, host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, as well as a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest episode of SKOL Search here on Vikings First and SKOL. I'm your host, Tyler Forness. With me, as always, is producer Dave. Now, if you are normally a Facebook person, you are not seeing this. You can only see these on YouTube, but you can also listen to them on our podcast feed. I recommend you go check that out with some other unique content, including some quick little prospect previews that I will be doing on there as well. So you will not want to miss it. And I want to say thank you to everybody who got us over 2,500. We passed the mark about 5 minutes after the show ended last night. We're already up to nearly 2,540. So thank you very much for that. It's makes us feel good that we know that we're doing something right and that you guys really appreciate what we do. So thank you very much. Now let's talk about a Norse god. No, we're not talking about Norse god. We're actually talking about Caleb Williams. But he's been built up to be this mythological figure. And it's not fair to him. And honestly, some of that hype is due to the success of Patrick Mahomes. It's the Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant effect. So if you follow the world of the NBA, it's like, oh, who's the next Michael Jordan? Who's the next LeBron James? No, they're the first them. It's not fair to put those kind of expectations on a young person, on a young star. It just sets themselves up to fail. And that sucks. That's brutal, but it is what it is. So let's talk about who the player is. Okay. So he started at Oklahoma, 5-star recruit. He was at over a 99, which is a very, very high mark. One of the highest quarterback recruits in recent memory. 6'1", 215 pounds, third-year junior. Did transfer from Oklahoma as he left Norman with Lincoln Riley to go over to USC. Completed 66.6% of his passes for 10,098 yards, 93 touchdowns, 14 picks. Also ran for 1,539 yards, 27 touchdowns. Caleb Williams is a true dual threat. And when you watch him play, it makes a lot of sense why people build him up to be this mythological figure. And we'll talk about the positives. We'll talk about the negatives. We'll talk about why he's not a mythological figure. And that's okay. Like, the only two quarterback prospects ever who should have been considered like mythological figures per se, John Elway and Andrew Luck. You can maybe argue Trevor Lawrence, but not even Peyton Manning was that great of a prospect. Like, people really wanted to take Ryan Leaf over him because Peyton Manning's arm, it was fine. You wanted what was in here. What was in here was the key to unlocking all the greatness that he had. The arm was just, it was fine. Wasn't special, but he was so good at everything else, didn't need to be. So let's start talking about Caleb Williams. And it's so interesting watching him because the offense that he plays in is like, we make jokes about it. It's like Lincoln Riley should be charged with crimes for how bad this offense is structured. But it did allow Caleb Williams to show some things that he wouldn't have been able to show in other offenses. He ran essentially a modern version of a triple option air raid offense. So what do I mean? Like, you have RPOs and read options where you do the mesh point, you fake the handoff to the running back, and then he'll take the ball out on the perimeter, but there will be a guy running in the flat, and he has the option now to either run it himself or throw it. Triple option. Just a different version. Yeah, you might be able to do that as a gadget here and there in the NFL, but it's not a sustainable thing. But it was also very air raid heavy. And some of these concepts with the receivers he had, look, the receivers were not good. And it was evident in some of these plays because the outward narrative is that Caleb Williams just tries to play hero ball. I've said it on this show. And there are times where he just tries to play hero ball instead of throwing it like a 10-yard layup. It's okay to take 10 yards. It took Patrick Mahomes a little bit to take the 10 yards. Well, guess what? He basically won a Super Bowl taking 10-yard plays this past year. So you can be really successful with that. But it takes guys who can make
some
play a little
runs with that. And smart play. I'll take smart play.
Yeah, and hey, sometimes you have to coach yourself up or get coached up and be willing to take those smart plays instead of just trying to take the big shots. Big shots are great. If you hit them, they're fantastic. It's okay to take a first down instead of a maybe touchdown every now and then, because that can help you build rhythm, can help you drive the ball down the field, and it can prevent you from having to punt. So there's a balance to these things. You want to take shots, but you have to be calculated about it. And Caleb Williams needs to learn that aspect. But let's talk about some of the things that make him great, okay? The first thing that stands out is the arm talent. It's incredible. He doesn't have the super strong arm like the Josh Allen or the Joe Milton, but he has a strong arm in a special way. He can layer the ball in there beautifully. He can throw on the run with touch and precision. He can do anything you ask him. If you want him to drive a ball from the far hash on a 15-yard out route, he can do that. If you want him to throw a 50-yard post with velocity, he can do that. You want him to lob a ball with touch on a corner route, beating cover 2, he can do that. He can do anything with that arm. He can do it from multiple arm angles. He can do it completely off platform. He can do it within rhythm. It doesn't matter. Caleb Williams can do it all. And it's probably, in my opinion, the main reason, because I don't like speaking for everybody else in draft media, but this is why Caleb Williams is viewed so highly, because he can do literally anything he wants with his arm. It is a special limb when it comes to football. He has a special ability to use it. Some of that is God-given. Some of that he has created himself. And the scary thing is, I heard this listening to Connor Rogers on the PFF Stock Exchange earlier today. He was told by a scout that if you are a younger quarterback like 2021, expect that arm strength to get stronger. So he hasn't even reached the pinnacle of what his arm strength can be. And it's already a massive plus trait for him. So that is a massive, massive positive. But it's not just that he has great arm strength. It's natural. And what I mean by natural is he doesn't have to, like, some guys can uncork a howitzer, but they got to torque their whole body into it. And it looks like it's forced. Caleb Williams can throw a ball from any position to any point in the field as easily as I can flipping a steak on my grill. That's how natural and easy it is. It's a truly impressive feat that a lot of people just can't get out of their heads, in my opinion, when it comes to the evaluation, because that is special. It's incredible to be able to see that kind of skill. But we'll get to more of some of the negatives later and why he's not a Norse god. I was really impressed with his understanding of quick game and RPOs and how efficient he was at running them. He understands how to manipulate defenders. So there was this one play, I believe it was against Arizona, where the defender is crashing in on him hard. And he's got the ball in the running back's stomach, the mesh point. And he holds it long enough to get the linebacker to commit to going after just him, because he's kind of midpointing it. He's kind of going after both guys. But he gets the linebacker deep enough where all he can do is get Caleb, the quarterback, and then Marshawn Lloyd just runs right past him for a touchdown. There's a next level ability to understand how to manipulate defenders, and he can do that in the running game as well. That triple option I told you about, they made it really effective and just a really easy play for Caleb to get him in rhythm, to get him rocking and rolling. And those little details will help at the next level. Initially, you want to be able to maximize some of the things that you're doing. You want to be able to thrive. but sometimes you have to get in rhythm. That's why almost every time you see the first play of the Vikings, play action, dump off to the flat to Josh Oliver, and he takes it 10 to 20 yards. It's just, hey, confidence build up, get in rhythm. All right, we're cooking with gas. Now let's start attacking down the field. All that matters. And he can do some of this at a very high level. And with that triple option, he's not afraid to run the ball. He has an aptitude to do it at a high level. He can elude defenders. He sees the field incredibly well. You don't necessarily want him doing that because of his natural God-given arm talent, but you can deploy it. And I think you're going to look at his success running the ball in a similar vein to what Justin Fields was 3 years ago. Now, Fields struggled so much as a passer, they basically made him a runner almost exclusively, and then they just kind of throw alongside of it. You could do more running initially with Williams, kind of like they did with Justin Fields his rookie year before they really made the offense run focused. But you don't that's not something you want to do long term, but he can do it. And I think he can do it at a very high level. And the one say to kind of pair with that, the one thing that impressed me, it wasn't just the field vision in the running game. He saw the field better in the passing game than I expected. And the reason being, you see all these instances where he's running around and he's trying to make these superhero plays. Some of it was a necessity because his receivers were bad and they couldn't get open nearly close to enough. They couldn't get open at all half the time. So he's going through reads and he's seeing the field and there's a clean pocket, but he needs to bail because he needs to try and create something because there's nothing there. And then they didn't help him a lot with the scramble drill stuff. And we'll talk about that with Drake May when we do his SKOL search, because that's a big sticking point I think people aren't talking about. And I thought he was much better at reading NFL style progressions than I would have anticipated coming in. And that's why you always, you can go in with, I think this way. This is why you have to be willing to change your opinion when you're presented with new information, because I thought he wasn't great at it. He was better than I thought. He still needs work, but being able to show that he was better than I had expected coming in, I thought was a really big positive for him. Dave, you have any thoughts on him?
I don't think he's coming to us. I, like a couple people have said, hope he goes to Chicago and they ruin him.
Well, Gary's asking, does it worry me if he goes to Chicago? I don't want to play him twice a year, but I also don't trust Chicago to do right by him either. So I'd rather they pick a quarterback I don't like. I'd rather them take Bo Nix, but that's not going to happen. So
now he does have some red flags in my book that I don't like, and we'll get into at least one of them during the grades. But one is his size, 6'1". I like my quarterbacks hopefully around 6'4". I want them bigger. He only weighs 215 pounds. That's not huge. Now, if you look at his legs, he's got beefy legs. So he's strong. He's not fragile. He's not like Jaden Daniels that you worry about gets hit wrong and suddenly snaps.
He's well built, I think is the term you're thinking of.
That's one of the red flags. And of course, the other one is he going to be mature enough or mentally strong enough? It's probably the better word, to handle an NFL offense, especially in a big city like Chicago or New York or LA or, he was obviously in LA, so I'm not going to give it to them, but New York or Philly or someplace like that where they're absolutely rabid about their players. And if there's any fault whatsoever, they get down on them really, really, really quickly. I don't know if he's going to be able to fit that sort of mold. And it's going to be interesting to see if he does and where he goes. Is Chicago set up to be, and this was asked by somebody earlier, is Chicago set up to support him? Can they do that? And I'm talking not just the football people, there to mentor him and guide him and do all the wonderful things that a good organization would do. But is the team set up? Will he have the requisite offensive line and the wide receivers capable of handling it in Chicago? Because everything's pointing to he's going number one to Chicago. But I wouldn't be surprised if suddenly that changes.
Yeah. I don't think Chicago's necessarily perfectly set up right now, but I think Caleb Williams is at year one is in a better situation than Justin Fields would be in year 4, because you can continue to build around him. You have a free agency still to build around that around him before you pick him, and then you have next year to be able to continue that, and then a third year, and then you have to worry about the extension. So you essentially have 3 off seasons to prepare him before you can even consider that extension. So I think he's in a good spot. Is he in a great spot? Nah. But how many
you could ruin
guys,
a quarterback in that amount of time too?
Well, here's the thing. How many teams drafting number 1 overall are good? The only team I can think of that's drafted like top 2 in the last decade, that was a good football team, was the 49ers in 2019 when they took Nick Bosa. They just dealt with a massive amount of injuries. Well, guess what? 2 years later, that year, they're in the Super Bowl. So you're not going to a great team. You have to elevate it. It took Joe Burrow a couple years. Bryce Young struggled on a just disastrous football team in Carolina. You're not expecting him to come in and be
that terrible.
No, but my point is
because Carolina's that terrible.
Yeah, my point though is, Dave, you're looking at a team that like they're in a little bit better straits, but you're not going into a great situation. You're not going into you could maybe argue it's good, but we'll see how that ends up transpiring over the next few years. You get picked first overall, you're not going to a great football team. It's just that simple. So we'll kind of see what ends up happening with his development.
Well, I'll take it this way. If most likely he's going to Chicago, would he do better straight out the get-go going to Minnesota with what Minnesota has in place?
1,000%. But Minnesota also was more successful last year than the Bears on an overall level.
Record?
It's when you consider the injuries that they had to deal with. So like the Vikings had just massive injuries across the board. They had an injury to Kirk Cousins, almost derailed the season. They lost Justin Jefferson for 7 games. Then they lost TJ Hawkinson. They dealt with an incredible amount of injuries, not to mention some of the injuries that they had on the defensive side of the football.
This is a good question from Gary.
We're not talking about the leadership skills because we don't know anything. And anybody who tries to tell you, oh, because he paints his nails or showed emotion like after a loss where he just got absolutely pulverized. No, we're not talking about that because we don't know.
That's not what I don't think that's what he's referring to.
No, I'm just saying I'm not talking about it because I just don't know. Everything I've heard from people I trust, he's a good leader and he loves the game of football. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
There's too many unfair narratives for completely unfair reasons that are floating out there. And I know Odie. I know you don't want to talk about Caleb Williams' leadership skills either because of that. But there are too many negative narratives out there, and we'll kind of leave it at that. Outside of that, like his teammates love him, we'll leave it there.
That's what matters. Are his teammates going to take that extra effort just to, because he's asking and wants to lead the team to win?
Yeah,
because that's what's going to be asked of him at the next level.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's talk about some negatives. The first negative we're going to talk about is going to be one that we've already discussed a little bit. Tends to play hero ball a little too much. It wasn't nearly as much as I expected because of what I saw in the back end and why he was scrambling on some of those plays. But he could just take a 5 to 15 yard layup, and he doesn't want to. And he'll learn that in the NFL, You got to take those layups sometimes. And it's okay to take those layups. If it's first or second down and you get 5 to 10 yards, yeah, take it. That's okay. And sometimes guys just have to have that coached into them. And it takes a long time. But when you have a guy that's hyper talented like this, it's really not that big of a surprise that he wants to play hero ball. It's okay. Delton asks, why did he leave Oklahoma? Oh, he just followed Lincoln Riley. He wanted to play for Lincoln Riley. That's why he went to Oklahoma from Washington, D.C., where he grew up. And that's why he followed him to USC. So that's it. Like, it's not a situation where he needed to leave. They ran him out of town. Spencer Rattler, they ran him out of town. Mm-hmm. Caleb Williams just wanted to play for Lincoln. So he did. All right. Let's talk about Caleb Williams dealing with pressure. Sometimes his lack of fundamental mechanics can amplify pressure, where Williams, like when we talk about guys like Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, they don't necessarily have the best mechanics, but they have the arm where it just doesn't matter. Like Aaron Rodgers throws so often just off his back foot and it just lands perfectly. Like Caleb Williams has a little bit of that to his game, and he doesn't necessarily utilize great mechanics because he doesn't have to. So he needs to learn how to get a better base under it. And then once he does, you're going to be able to see things improve greatly. And I think that with a little bit of NFL coaching, you can really hit that footwork home. Pressure gets into his face. He tries to hero ball a little bit, and those throws end up being a little poorer because of those mechanical issues. He's not consistent enough, and that's okay. Odie's chewing on my laundry basket, so I apologize if you guys can hear that. To pair with that, he also has a little bit of arm arrogance, and it gets him into trouble. He knows he can hit every throw, and sometimes you're going to get in situations. Josh Allen does this a lot, where he knows, I can hit this throw. I'm going to hit it, and then it's an interception. Williams has a little bit of that to his game, a little bit of that bozo gene that we've talked about many, many times on this show, and he'll have you wanting to pull your hair out at times, but he's also a really, really good football player. And you're just going to have to kind of live with some of it because you know he can hit those throws and that he's going to be a game changer in that way. Brett Favre. Vikings don't get to the 2009 NFC Championship game without Brett Favre.
And so you're talking about a man who had extreme arm arrogance, as you put it. And I'd rather have a quarterback that had it than not.
That's a perfect example. You're just going to have to live with the bad because he's going to give you a lot of good. So it just is what it is. But if you can limit those a little bit, I think you're going to be in a much, much better spot. Know when you can pick your spots and know when you can't. And sometimes if you just have to have it, you know what? Just let it rip and we'll deal with the consequences at that point. I do like Williams's ability to sense pressure on an overall scale. He struggles with the blind side where he just doesn't really feel it at all. And it manifested it for him a few times during the season where he would just get smacked. And I want to see him improve in that area, but he can sense pressure, and that's overall very good. So I'm pretty happy with his ability to deal with pressure. We'll kind of see how things will end up working in the NFL. Yeah, Odie is really going to town on that. Holy crap. All right, let's kind of talk about the overall scale. Caleb Williams, if you watched my show last Wednesday, he is my quarterback 2. He is not my quarterback 1. There is a lot of positives to his game, but he is like, it's that arm strength, 9.6. The only perfect 10 I've ever given in that was Joe Milton, because it's literally the strongest arm I've ever seen. And to me, that's a 10. So there's a lot of good here, but he needs some work. He needs some refinement. He is not a finished product, and that's okay. He was built up to be this mythological figure, which the media does a lot. Let's just be real. They do it a lot. But he was able to take things to the next level. And he won a Heisman Trophy. He had the Trojans in a great spot consistently because of his play, despite not having the great receivers after Jordan Addison, despite having an awful defense. That defense was worse than some of those defenses in the early 2000s of the Vikings when you were starting Kenny Wright and Waswa Sirwanga at cornerback. These defenses were atrocious despite having multiple 4 and 5 star players. Alex Grinch will be on trial at some point for how bad these defenses were. It was atrocious. But Caleb Williams, he's a very good football player. Is he great? We'll find out. But I think he's a very, very good prospect. And any team drafting in that top 5 should feel very lucky to be able to draft Caleb Williams.
Now, this was the other flag I wanted to bring up. His intermediate grade isn't spectacular compared to the rest of the class, and his pressure grade absolutely sucks.
Well, pressure grade, some of that's hero ball, and where he could lay it up, and he doesn't. Some of the intermediate stuff is there's a wide open target, and he won't take it. Like, there's some context to it. Plus, a lot of quarterback play has to do with who you're throwing to. So I'm not saying like that these aren't nothing, but I am saying that I'm not looking at these as gospel when it comes to his evaluation, because he is really, really good. He didn't have a lot of help.
Now, Norshfius is asking about system fit, scheme fit.
I would prefer him in a system where he could really attack downfield. I think he can be scheme diverse, but I would prefer him in like an Air Coryell where he can really throw the ball down the field. Like, I think, didn't the Bears hire Kellen Moore as the OC?
I don't remember, but maybe.
I think they did. And if they did, like that's going to fit Caleb a lot. It's going to be an easy transition because he threw a lot of hitches. He threw a lot of seams, and he did a lot of that air raidy stuff. The Air Coryell's got some of that in there too. So I think that would be a good system for him. We'll see if Kellen Moore can actually maximize him, because Kellen Moore, I don't think he's as good of an offensive coordinator now as we thought he was. So I think he'll be ultimately fine, but we'll see. That's our show. Caleb Williams, very good football player, probably going number 1 overall. There is a chance that either Jaden Daniels or Drake May can top him. Combine, pro days, there's a chance. Baker Mayfield wasn't going first overall until about 24 hours before the draft. So you just never know. Oh, it's Waldron. Waldron does a lot of the McVay stuff, like the McVay inspired Shanahan tree stuff, not the Shanahan tree. So I think that'll work. I think it'll work. Waldron has a very similar style to what O'Connell does. I think it'll work. I would prefer Drake May, but that's just me. And speaking of, we'll be talking about May on Thursday, and we will be having a lot of fun in doing so. Tomorrow night on the Real Forno Show, we will be having a locked and loaded, ready to go show for you with a topic that will be to be determined. Don't forget, 2-0 bloggers on Sundays at 4:00 now instead of Saturdays till the start of the NFL season. Until then, thank you very much for watching. I'm Tyler. But
we also have the NFC North show this week, in which Vikings First and SKOL is hosting.
Oh, so there we go.
Be tomorrow, which I'm going to ask. We can push it out to Thursday. Thursdays seem to work better. And we're going to be talking NFC North. And I'm sure this young man over there that we just profiled will be one of the talking points. So watch for that notification as it comes out, and join me, the Bear Claw podcast, Pay from there, and then June and Foster from Bleachers to Speakers, the Lions podcast, and how they like things. Edwin, I see your avatar there. From one deadhead to another, we say SKOL.
SKOL Vikings, baby.
Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love, our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!